to be delivered with a calm, deliberate, almost hypnotic cadence. No wasted energy, no dramatic hand gestures, just pure, unblinking focus. I want you to think about the last time you walked into a crowded room and felt like you were breathing in everyone else's psychological exhaust. You felt the anxiety of the man in the corner. You absorbed the hidden arrogance of the person leading the meeting. You went home exhausted, depleted, and convinced that your sensitivity is your greatest weakness. You've been told that being an empath is a beautiful curse. You've been told to shield your energy, to build walls, to hide. Everything you've been told is a lie designed to keep you weak. What if I told you that the emotional exhaustion you feel isn't a design flaw? It's a calibration error. You are standing at the very bottom of a ladder you didn't even know existed. Most highly sensitive people spend their entire lives on the first rung, the reactive stage. They survive. They bleed. But there is a ceiling. And above that ceiling lies a psychological territory so rare, so incredibly potent, that the people who occupy it are no longer victims of their environment. They are the architects of it. We call it the Sophia stage. It is the terminal phase of empathic development, and 99% of sensitive people will never, ever reach it. Why? Because reaching it requires you to burn down every comfortable idea you have about what it means to be good. It requires you to trade your victimhood for absolute psychological sovereignty. In the next few minutes, we are going to pull back the curtain on this hidden class of people. You are going to learn the exact behavioral shifts that occur when an empath stops absorbing and starts directing. If you stay until the end of this talk, you will not only understand the exact mechanics of this transition, but you will also recognize the precise moment a Sophia stage empath is using your own subconscious mind to rewrite your behavior, and how you can access that exact same power. But a word of warning. Once you understand the mechanics of the Sophia stage, you can never go back to being a blind observer. You will see the matrix of human interaction for exactly what it is, and the burden of that sight is heavy. Look at the person sitting next to you. Within 3 seconds of looking at them, your brain has already made 1,000 micro-calculations. You've judged their posture, the tension in their jaw, the slight asymmetry of their collar, the speed of their blink rate. Your subconscious is a supercomputer designed to read human behavior. But if you are a standard empath, you do not use this data. You let the data use you. You absorb their anxiety, you internalize their stress, and you call it caring. Today we are going to dismantle that entire paradigm. The reason you must listen to every single word of this presentation is simple. The psychological ecosystem is shifting. The manipulators, the narcissists, the emotional predators of the world have spent decades studying how to exploit your sensitivity. If you do not learn the transition to the Sophia stage today, you will remain prey in an environment that is rapidly evolving. But if you understand what I'm about to show you, you will possess the ultimate human superpower, the ability to remain completely invisible while holding absolute influence over the room. This is not about healing. This is about psychological dominance through silent calibration. To understand the Sophia stage, we must first look at where 99% of empaths are currently trapped. We call this the reactive loop. In this phase, the empath is an open target. When a toxic person enters their space, the empath's mirror neurons fire on overdrive. They literally experience the predator's inner chaos. The empath's automatic response is to try and fix the discomfort by pleasing, appeasing, or retreating. This is not empathy. It is a trauma response. It is a biological submission signal. The manipulator sees this instantly. They read the slight tilt of your head, the pacifying gestures, like touching your neck or adjusting your watch, and they know they have access to your emotional control panel. You have handed them the keys because you cannot bear the discomfort of their negative energy. The journey to the Sophia stage begins with a brutal decision. the refusal to own what is not yours. The Sophia empath has developed what we call the sovereign shield. They do not block emotions, they categorize them. When they feel a wave of anger, anxiety, or deceit radiating from another person, their heart rate does not spike, their pupils do not dilate. Instead, they run a real-time behavioral diagnostic. They ask one silent question: whose data is this? The moment they identify the emotion as external, they sever the biological connection. They observe the anger of a manipulator the same way a meteorologist observes a storm system, with clinical, detached interest. By refusing to react, they deny the predator the one thing they desperately need: feedback. When you do not feed a manipulator's behavioral loops, their psychological system begins to glitch. This is where the Sophia empath becomes truly dangerous. Once they are detached, they do not hide, they calibrate. Because their own emotional channel is completely quiet, they can hear the faintest whispers of your subconscious. They notice the micro-expressions that flash across your face for a fraction of a second, the slight lift of the inner eyebrow indicating hidden grief, the microtension in the upper lip signaling contempt. They hear the subtle shifts in your vocal pitch when you lie. A Sophia empath does not call you out. They do not argue. Instead, they use this data to build a perfect psychological mirror. If you are insecure, they will subtly reflect an aura of absolute validation. If you are desperate for control, they will present a blank canvas of submission. They become exactly what your subconscious mind is begging for. They slip past your defenses because they look, sound, and feel exactly like your deepest, unspoken desires. You think you have found your soulmate, but in reality, you have met your own reflection. And they hold the mirror. When a toxic person or a narcissist encounters a Sophia stage empath, they assume they are dealing with another easy victim. They initiate their standard behavioral patterns: the gaslighting, the subtle put-downs, the emotional withholding. But the Sophia empath does not defend themselves. Defense implies that the attack has registered. Instead, the Sophia empath simply holds the mirror steady. They look the predator directly in the eyes, specifically focusing on the non-dominant eye to trigger a subtle threat response in the predator's brain, and they say nothing. They let the silence stretch. Human beings cannot tolerate a vacuum of feedback. In the absence of a reaction, the predator will begin to overcompensate. They will talk louder, make bigger mistakes, and expose their own vulnerabilities. The Sophia empath simply watches the predator dismantle their own mask, utilizing nothing more than quiet attention and absolute presence. The world does not need more soft, bleeding hearts who collapse under the weight of other people's darkness. The world needs sovereign, calibrated minds. The transition to the Sophia stage is not easy. It requires you to let go of the ego gratification of being the helper. It requires you to sit in the cold, quiet space of objective observation. But once you step into that stage, you are no longer a victim of the psychological currents around you. You are the anchor. Start today. The next time someone tries to project their anger, their fear, or their manipulation onto you, do not flinch. Do not argue. Do not absorb it. Step back inside your own mind. Observe their breathing. Notice their posture. Smile inward and realize that they have just handed you every single tool you need to dismantle their illusion. The stage is yours. Walk onto it. Most highly sensitive individuals wander through life under the profound illusion that their empathy is a passive sponge. They believe their primary spiritual and psychological duty is to simply feel, to absorb the ambient emotional residue of every room they enter, to carry the unspoken burdens of strangers, and to suffer in silence as a testament to their own goodness. This is the reactive loop, a psychological trap disguised as a virtue. When you are stuck in this loop, you are not actually practicing empathy, You are reacting to raw data without a processing system. You walk into a space, your nervous system registers a spike in someone else's anxiety, and your body immediately responds by mimicking that exact state of tension. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, and you instinctively search for a way to pacify the discomfort. You might try to fix the other person's mood, or more commonly, you retreat into isolation to recharge. This constant cycle of absorption and retreat is not a demonstration of strength, it is a confession of powerlessness. It is a biological submission to the emotional whims of your environment. The core error of the standard empath lies in a fundamental misunderstanding of human biology. Your sensitivity is not a shield meant to absorb impact, nor is it a cage designed to keep you separate from the world. It is a highly sophisticated, real-time diagnostic tool. In any other discipline, a highly sensitive instrument is used to measure, analyze, and calibrate a response. A seismologist does not absorb the energy of an earthquake to the point of collapse. They read the needle, map the fault lines, and predict the next movement. Yet the reactive empath allows the earthquake of human emotion to shatter their own internal foundation. They misinterpret the diagnostic reading as a personal assault. By treating every emotional signal as something they must personally own and digest, they render themselves completely blind to the strategic value of the data they are receiving. They are so busy drowning in the feeling that they completely miss the behavioral blueprint the other person is revealing. When you treat your sensitivity as a burden, you signal your vulnerability to every psychological predator in the room. Manipulators, narcissists, and emotional opportunists do not target empaths because empaths are weak. They target them because empaths are predictable. They know that a reactive empath cannot tolerate negative emotional tension. All a manipulator has to do is project a small amount of anger, guilt, or disapproval, and the reactive empath will immediately bend their own boundaries to alleviate that pressure. You become incredibly easy to navigate and control because your responses are entirely determined by the emotional climate someone else chooses to create. To break this illusion of powerlessness, you must first recognize that the pain you feel in the presence of toxic behavior is not your pain. It is merely data. It is a biological notification flashing on the screen of your consciousness, telling you exactly who is standing in front of you, what they are hiding, and how they operate. The moment you stop trying to feel the data and start choosing to read it, the entire dynamic shifts. To understand the Sophia stage, we must first look at the origin of the word itself. Sophia represents divine wisdom, deep discernment, and the ultimate integration of knowledge with action. For an empath, reaching this stage means crossing a distinct, irreversible psychological threshold. They transition from a state of passive emotional absorption, where they are merely a victim of the energetic weather around them, to a state of highly conscious, strategic psychological calibration. In the lower stages of empathy, the individual's nervous system acts like an ungrounded wire, catching every passing current and short-circuiting their own peace of mind. The Sophia stage empath, however, has grounded themselves completely. They have developed a highly sophisticated filtering system that allows them to perceive everything while absorbing absolutely nothing. They no longer ask themselves how they can survive the emotions of others. They ask how they can decode those emotions to understand the hidden architecture of the minds they are interacting with. This transition is not a gradual softening. It is a sharp, intentional hardening of one's psychological boundaries. When a Sophia empath enters a room, their sensory apparatus is firing on all cylinders, but their emotional core remains entirely quiet. They are not looking for emotional connection. They are collecting raw, unfiltered behavioral metrics. They observe the micro-hesitations in a person's speech, the subtle shifting of weight from one foot to the other, the brief micro-expression of contempt that flashes across a face before being replaced by a polite smile. To a standard observer, these details are invisible. To a Sophia stage empath, they are a roadmap of the subject's deepest insecurities, desires, and hidden motives. Because the Sophia empath's own mind is not cluttered with the anxiety of trying to please or heal others, they have the cognitive bandwidth to run real-time diagnostics on everyone in their immediate environment. What makes this stage so formidable is the absolute lack of reactivity. When a manipulator attempts to deploy standard tactics of emotional projection, such as guilt, subtle aggression, or gaslighting, the Sophia stage empath does not flinch, defend, or counterattack. They recognize that these tactics are merely outward symptoms of the manipulator's internal chaos. Instead of taking the bait, the Sophia empath observes the tactic with the cold, precise focus of a scientist watching a chemical reaction in a controlled laboratory. They allow the manipulator to play out their entire behavioral loop, knowing that every action the predator takes provides more data to map their psychological vulnerabilities. By remaining completely detached, the Sophia empath deprives the predator of the emotional reaction they need to sustain their control. In this state of absolute stillness, the power dynamic shifts entirely. The Sophia empath becomes a silent, invisible observer who holds the keys to the room, navigating the psychological landscape with a level of clarity and precision that others cannot even comprehend. Weaponized calibration is the precise operational mechanism that separates the Sophia stage empath from every other sensitive person on the planet. For the average empath, sensing someone else's internal state is a passive, painful experience that results in immediate overwhelm. For the Sophia stage empath, this sensory intake is transformed into a deliberate, highly focused, offensive asset. When they look at you, they are not just feeling your feelings, they are actively calculating your behavioral baseline. They observe the micro-tensions in your frontalis muscle when you try to hide your anxiety. They register the subtle pitch shifts in your vocal delivery that signal a lack of congruence. And they track the slight somatic adjustments you make when a sensitive topic is introduced into the conversation. Your body is constantly broadcasting your deepest psychological secrets. And while most people are completely deaf to this broadcast, the Sophia stage empath is recording and indexing every single frequency. This deep diagnostic reading allows them to engage in what can only be described as strategic mirroring. They do not mirror you out of a desperate subconscious need to be liked or to fit in. Instead, they consciously calibrate their posture, their breathing rate, their vocal tone, and their emotional temperature to match your internal state perfectly. By reflecting your own subconscious reality back to you, they bypass your brain's natural threat detection mechanisms. Your subconscious mind looks at them and sees an exact, non-threatening reflection of itself, instantly dropping all psychological defenses. Once these defenses are down, the Sophia empath holds absolute, invisible influence. They can plant subtle verbal anchors, utilize strategic pauses to induce cognitive discomfort, or gently guide your emotional state from anxiety to absolute compliance without you ever realizing that your behavior is being actively steered by an outside force. What makes this weaponized calibration so devastatingly effective is that it operates entirely below the threshold of human awareness. You cannot fight against a force you do not know is operating. If someone yells at you, insults you, or tries to overtly manipulate you, your conscious mind immediately flags the attack and mounts a defense. But when a Sophia stage empath calibrates to your frequency, there is nothing to fight. They are not pushing against you, they are stepping into your psychological blind spots. They read your unfulfilled needs, whether it is a hunger for validation, a fear of abandonment, or a desperate desire for control. And they present a perfectly tailored behavioral illusion that satisfies those needs. They become a ghost in your psychological machine, pulling the levers of your behavior by simply adjusting their own calibrated presence. It is a level of influence that requires no raised voices, no dramatic gestures, and no overt manipulation, leaving the target entirely exposed while believing they are in complete control. To transition into the Sophia stage, an empath must undergo a radical shift in how they manage their internal boundary system, establishing what is known as the sovereign shield. For the majority of sensitive individuals, emotional boundaries are porous, constantly fluctuating based on who is in the room. They mistakenly believe that to be deeply empathetic, they must keep their doors unlocked and let the emotional debris of others clutter their internal home. The Sophia stage empath recognizes that this is not empathy, it is a lack of psychic structure. The sovereign shield is built on the foundation of absolute emotional detachment, not a cold, unfeeling state of psychopathy, but a clinical, highly disciplined separation of self from environment. It is the understanding that while you can perceive, map, and fully comprehend another person's pain, anger, or deceit, you are under no obligation to host it within your own body. This shield functions by replacing emotional absorption with instant cognitive categorization. When a toxic person or a manipulator attempts to project their internal chaos onto a Sophia stage empath, the shield intercepts the projection at the boundary line. Instead of allowing the nervous system to mimic the incoming stress, the Sophia empath's intellect instantly translates the emotional wave into behavioral data points. They observe the projection as an external object, completely independent of their own identity. If a manipulator throws a tantrum designed to induce guilt, the Sophia empath's heart rate remains resting, their breathing stays deep and diaphragmatic, and their gaze remains entirely steady. They do not accept the emotional package being delivered to them. They simply examine the delivery stamp to see where it came from. This absolute refusal to take ownership of external feelings strips the manipulator of their primary weapon, which relies entirely on the target's willingness to feel guilty or anxious on their behalf. The power of this sovereign detachment lies in the total control of emotional feedback loops. When you hold an active sovereign shield, your internal state becomes a closed system. You are completely self-referential. Your joy, your peace, and your confidence are generated from within, completely immune to the emotional atmospheric pressure of the outside world. This level of self-mastery is deeply disorienting to those who are accustomed to manipulating others through emotional puppetry. When a manipulator realizes that their anger cannot make you defensive and their sadness cannot make you codependent, they experience a profound loss of control. By holding this unwavering, detached presence, the Sophia stage empath becomes a biological anchor in the room, forcing everyone else's erratic emotional waves to break uselessly against their immovable boundary. The ultimate danger of a Sophia stage empath lies in their transformation into an absolute, unyielding psychological mirror. In the standard behavioral landscape, when a toxic individual or a narcissist launches an attack, they expect a counter-reaction. They are looking for anger, defense, tears, or justification, because these responses validate their power and give them a tangible target to strike against. They understand how to fight against resistance. However, they are completely unequipped to deal with a void. The Sophia stage empath does not fight, argue, or attempt to defend their character. Instead, they step aside and allow the toxic person's psychological weight to collapse entirely under its own momentum. They hold up a quiet, clinical reflection of the predator's internal state, offering zero friction. By refusing to absorb the blow or throw one back, they leave the manipulator striking empty air, causing them to lose their balance and fall forward into their own psychological traps. This mirroring effect is achieved through absolute presence and strategic silence. When a manipulator attempts to gaslight or project shame, the Sophia stage empath simply observes. They do not interrupt. They do not try to correct the lie. They let the manipulator speak until they run out of words, and then they hold the silence. Because human beings are hardwired to seek feedback to confirm their reality, a prolonged silence from a completely calm observer is deeply threatening to the ego. In the absence of a defensive reaction, the manipulator's mind begins to spiral. They wonder why their words did not land, what the quiet observer knows that they do not, and whether their own mask has slipped. To fill the agonizing quiet, the manipulator will almost always begin to over-explain, overcompensate, and speak frantically, exposing their deepest insecurities and contradictions in the process. By holding this mirror steady, the Sophia stage empath forces the toxic person to confront their own ugly reality, completely unfiltered. For a narcissist or a manipulator who has spent their entire life running from their inner emptiness, this confrontation is psychologically devastating. They are forced to look at their own manipulation, their own desperation, and their own weakness reflected back to them in the unblinking, calm eyes of the empath. The Sophia empath does not need to utter a single harsh word or construct a complex trap. They simply stand as an immovable, neutral witness to the toxic person's self-destruction. The predator's own projection is bounced back to them at maximum velocity, forcing them to swallow the very poison they intended to feed to their victim. It is a quiet, devastating execution of psychological justice that leaves the manipulator entirely defeated.